Across Tanzania, tension is rising once again. Just days after a bitter and violent election, President Samia Suluhu Hassan has shocked the nation with a cabinet reshuffle that places two of her own family members, her daughter and her son-in-law, into powerful ministerial positions. These appointments have ignited fierce debate, reopened wounds from the post-election chaos, and left many wondering whether the country is witnessing bold leadership or a dangerous slide into family-driven politics. Today, we uncover the full story behind these controversial appointments, the unrest that came before them, and why this moment could reshape Tanzania's political future. In late October 2025, Tanzania found itself in one of the most turbulent political moments in its recent history. The country had just emerged from a tense and highly controversial general election in which President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner. But her victory was overshadowed by chaos. Key opposition candidates had been blocked from running, sparking widespread anger among citizens who felt the electoral playing field had been tilted long before voting day. As results were announced, protests quickly erupted across several cities. Streets filled with crowds demanding answers, and the atmosphere was thick with uncertainty and fear. What followed was a wave of violence unlike anything Tanzania had seen in years. Security forces were deployed in large numbers, and as clashes broke out, tear gas filled the air and gunshots were reported in some neighborhoods. The government responded by imposing a curfew, and in a move that shocked many, internet access across the country was either slowed to a crawl or cut off almost entirely. People struggled to know what was happening around them, and many worried that an information blackout would only hide abuses rather than restore peace. Messages circulated warning citizens against sharing images or videos that could cause panic, with authorities threatening harsh consequences for those who violated these instructions. Families waited anxiously for updates on loved ones, while opposition groups accused security forces of using excessive force and even attempting to hide the true extent of casualties. As these claims spread quietly through offline channels, President Samia publicly expressed sorrow over the loss of life and announced the formation of a commission that would investigate the causes of the violence. Critics, however, doubted whether such a commission would reveal the full truth, especially after an election they believed lacked transparency. With the country still shaken, President Samia made her next move, one that would ignite an entirely new wave of controversy. She unveiled a sweeping cabinet reshuffle, naming 27 ministers and 29 deputy ministers in her new administration. Ordinarily, this kind of post-election reorganization is expected. But this time, the appointments included two names that sent shockwaves throughout the nation: her daughter, Wanu Hafidh Ameir, and her son-in-law, Mohamed Mchengerwa. Wanu Hafidh Ameir, born in Zanzibar and already an experienced politician, was appointed Deputy Minister for Education, Science, and Technology. She had served both in the Zanzibar House of Representatives and in the National Parliament, and she held a law degree. Her husband, Mohamed Mchengerwa, also a well-known political figure, was appointed Minister of Health, taking charge of one of the most sensitive and vital ministries in the country. The fact that both the president's daughter and her son-in-law were elevated to powerful government positions at the same time immediately set off fierce public debate. Many Tanzanians saw this as a clear example of nepotism, a consolidation of power meant to keep decision-making within the president's inner circle. Critics argued that in a moment when the nation was already questioning the legitimacy of the election, placing close family in high office only deepened suspicions. They worried about conflicts of interest, weakened accountability, and the possibility that loyalty to the president would overshadow loyalty to the public. The timing also raised eyebrows. Coming so soon after violent unrest, the appointments felt to many like a tone-deaf decision. The nation was still grieving, still demanding answers, and still trying to understand what had led to the deaths of protesters. Against that backdrop, announcing that two of the president's closest family members would now be helping run major sectors of government struck many as politically insensitive. Supporters of President Samia, however, defended her choices. They insisted that both Wanu and Mchengerwa were qualified, experienced, and capable. According to them, trust is an important factor in forming a government, and the president had every right to choose people she believed would help her fulfill her agenda. They pointed out that family members serving in public office is not unheard of in global politics. But outside the circle of government loyalists, frustration continued to grow. Some observers said the appointments mark a shift toward old patterns of governance that Tanzanians had hoped were fading away, patterns in which political families pass power among themselves and public offices become extensions of private networks. Others argued that even if Wanu and Mchengerwa were competent, the symbolism of the decision overshadowed any merits they might bring to the table. Adding to the tension was the appointment of other politically connected figures, including the son of a former president, which fueled claims that the cabinet was becoming a gathering of dynasties rather than a reflection of national diversity and talent. As the reshuffle rippled through the political landscape, commentators asked whether President Samia's promise of reform and openness was beginning to fade. Still, the president urged her cabinet to work with integrity and commitment. She spoke of renewal, accountability, and the need to rebuild trust in government institutions. But for many Tanzanians, it remained unclear whether the new cabinet would help stabilize the country or deepen divisions. The roles given to Wanu and Mchengerwa, education and health, are critical to the lives of ordinary citizens. Their performance in these positions could either restore confidence or fuel even greater skepticism. Now the nation watches closely. The story of Tanzania's post-election period is still unfolding, and the decisions made during these early days of Samia Suluhu Hassan's new term may shape her legacy permanently. Will the country heal from the unrest? Will the new ministers prove their critics wrong? Or will the controversy surrounding these family appointments define a turning point in Tanzanian politics? Only time will tell, but for now, the debate continues, and the country remains on edge as it enters this uncertain new chapter. As the dust from the protests slowly settled, and the country tried to understand the heavy toll of the post-election chaos, President Samia Suluhu Hassan stepped forward with an announcement that would send the entire nation into another wave of debate. She unveiled her new cabinet, a lineup that was expected to show strength, unity, and a fresh start after such a turbulent election. Instead, it became the center of an even bigger storm. Tanzanians listened carefully as the names were read out. At first, the appointment seemed routine, a mix of old faces and new ones like any other post-election reshuffle. But then came the moment that changed the tone completely. The president named her daughter, Wanu Hafidh Ameir, as the new Deputy Minister for Education, Science, and Technology. Moments later, she appointed her son-in-law, Mohamed Mchengerwa, as the new Minister of Health. Two key ministries, both now in the hands of people directly tied to the president by blood and marriage. The reaction was instant. In living rooms, offices, buses, and markets, people paused in disbelief. Many wondered whether they had heard correctly: a mother, her daughter, and her son-in-law all serving in the same top tier of government. The timing could not have been more sensitive. The nation had barely recovered from the violent clashes and emotional wounds of the disputed election. Families were still mourning loved ones lost during the protests. Opposition leaders were still demanding accountability. And just as people expected a healing message or a unifying gesture, the reshuffle instead felt to many like a tightening of power within one family. Wanu Hafidh Ameir was not a stranger to politics. She had built her own political career, served in parliament, and had a legal background. But none of that shielded her appointment from criticism. For many Tanzanians, this wasn't about her qualifications. It was the principle, the symbolism. Education is one of the most important pillars of the nation, responsible for shaping future generations, and now it was partly in the hands of the president's daughter. Her husband, Mohamed Mchengerwa, had also been active in government for years. He had held several positions before and was considered a familiar face within the country's political structure. But becoming the Minister of Health placed him in direct control of a ministry that affects the daily survival and well-being of millions. With the public still shaken from the violence, and hospitals still dealing with the aftermath of injuries from the protests, the appointment struck many as a questionable choice at such a delicate time. Across the country, criticisms grew louder. Opposition groups accused the president of nepotism, warning that such moves weaken confidence in democratic institutions. Civil society leaders argued that the government should be widening the circle of leadership, not narrowing it. Political analysts said the reshuffle felt less like a renewal and more like a consolidation of loyalty. Some citizens worried openly that decisions in these ministries would no longer be guided purely by public service, but by personal allegiance to the president. But even as criticism spread, there were those who defended the decision. Supporters of the president argued that both Wanu and Mchengerwa were capable and experienced, and that trust is an essential factor when building a team to run a country. They claimed that the president had the right to choose people she believed in, people she knew would follow her vision without friction or internal conflict. They insisted that the appointments should be judged by performance, not family ties. Still, the public mood remained divided. In some neighborhoods, the controversy sparked heated debates. In others, it deepened a quiet sense of worry about where the country was heading. Many Tanzanians feared that the reshuffle signaled the rise of political dynasties, families holding on to power across generations, turning public office into something inherited rather than earned. They pointed out that the cabinet also included other politically connected figures, and this only fueled the feeling that the government was becoming more exclusive, not more representative. Inside government circles, President Samia urged her new ministers to work with integrity, discipline, and loyalty to the people. She spoke of transformation, accountability, and national progress. But outside State House, the public was still struggling to reconcile those words with the reality of the appointments. For many, the question was simple. How can trust be rebuilt if the highest offices appear to be staying within a single family? As days passed, commentators warned that the country could be headed toward a deeper political divide. The ministries of education and health were not just any portfolios, they were at the heart of social development. A misstep in either sector could have long-term consequences. And with national tensions still raw, even small decisions made by these new ministers would be watched closely, analyzed, and judged. Across the nation, people waited to see whether Wanu and Mchengerwa would rise to the challenge and prove themselves beyond their family connections, or whether the controversy surrounding their appointments would grow into a defining crisis for the president's second term. Tanzania stood at a delicate point, with many hoping that these leaders would bring stability, fairness, and competence. Yet beneath that hope, there remained a lingering fear that the reshuffle marked the beginning of a new era of family-centered politics. And so, as the cabinet settled into its work, the whole country watched, uncertain, divided, but fully aware that the decisions made in these early days could shape the future of Tanzania for years to come. The news of the appointment spread across Tanzania almost instantly, and even now, days later, the country is still buzzing with mixed reactions. In markets, on buses, in WhatsApp groups, in university hostels, and even within government offices, the discussion has not slowed down. People are still shocked, still debating, still trying to make sense of why the president would appoint her own daughter and son-in-law at such a sensitive moment, right after the violence and uncertainty that followed the election. For many Tanzanians who watch the post-election chaos unfold, the timing feels almost too sharp. They expected the reshuffle to signal healing, reconciliation, and a new chapter. Instead, these two appointments have reopened wounds, fueling fears that the government might be drifting toward family-driven leadership. Critics are still vocal today, saying the move looks like a deliberate tightening of power, a way for Samia to surround herself with people whose loyalty is unquestionable. But the story is far from one-sided. Even as criticism grows, there is also a strong wave of support online and offline. Some Tanzanians argue that the president has been under immense pressure after the violence, and that she needs people she can trust by her side. Supporters are still defending her today, insisting that both her daughter and son-in-law are qualified and capable, and that what matters now is performance, not bloodlines. To them, this is a moment to give the new ministers a chance, not to judge them before they even begin their work. Political analysts are carefully watching the situation as it unfolds in real time. Many believe this is one of the biggest tests of Samia's leadership so far. With emotions still raw from the unrest, the government needs stability more than ever, yet the appointments have instead lit up a national debate that refuses to calm down. International observers, too, are paying close attention. Statements and commentary are coming out even now, as neighboring countries and rights organizations try to understand what these sudden family appointments mean for Tanzania's democratic trajectory. Some worry that the move could weaken the perception of fairness and inclusivity in government, especially after such a contested election. Others urge caution, saying it is too early to judge, that the real impact will be seen in the coming months, depending on how the new ministers perform. Inside Tanzania, the pressure is building. The new Minister of Education, the president's daughter, is already facing expectations that grow heavier each day. People want to see immediate signs of responsibility, humility, and commitment. In the Ministry of Health, the president's son-in-law is also under the microscope. Social media is filled with questions. Will he put the nation first? Will he work transparently? Will he prove the critics wrong? Right now, nobody can say for sure. The air is thick with uncertainty, hope, suspicion, and curiosity, all at the same time. The country is holding its breath, watching closely, waiting to see what decisions the new ministers will make and how President Samia will handle the mounting tension. One thing is certain, this is not a moment Tanzania will forget soon. The debate is alive, loud, and ongoing, and the story is still unfolding, every hour, every day. On the streets of Dar es Salaam, Arusha, Mwanza, Dodoma, and even in smaller towns, the mood remains unsettled. You can feel it in the way people gather in small circles outside shops, in the murmurs shared by boda riders, in the quiet but intense conversations taking place in bus queues and tea kiosks. Every corner of the country seems to be discussing the same thing, the president's sudden move to bring her daughter and son-in-law into the government. Some citizens speak with anger, shaking their heads and calling it a betrayal just when they expected calm and unity. Others, more cautious, say they want to wait and see what happens next. But almost everyone agrees, the announcement has disrupted the country's emotional recovery from the post-election violence. Instead of moving forward, it feels as if Tanzania has stepped into an even more uncertain chapter. In political circles, tension is even higher. Opposition parties have been holding emergency internal meetings to strategize their next moves. Some leaders are preparing press statements, others are quietly reaching out to diplomats and human rights groups. Behind closed doors, they are debating whether to push for investigations, demand transparency, or call for peaceful protests. They know the public is watching them closely, hungry for guidance, yet wary of anything that could spark more unrest. Members of the ruling party are not entirely united either. While many are publicly defending the president, insiders whisper that not everyone is comfortable. Some feel blindsided. Others fear that the appointments might weaken the party's image at a time when unity is desperately needed. But none of them dare speak openly, not yet. The political temperature is too high, and every word carries weight. Meanwhile, the media landscape is buzzing like never before. Newsrooms are working overtime, journalists chasing statements, government sources, analysts, and eyewitnesses. Television panels have become heated, radio call-in shows are overflowing with emotional voices, and online platforms are flooded with opinions, rumors, and analysis. Every hour, a new angle emerges, a new debate begins, a new wave of comments rises. But beneath all this noise, something deeper is building, a sense that this moment might set the tone for Tanzania's future. Parents wonder what these decisions mean for their children's education. Health workers quietly question how the new leadership will affect hospitals and clinics. Youth groups debate whether their hopes for a more transparent government are slipping away. Religious leaders preach calm, urging the nation not to fall back into violence. And yet, amid the tension, there is also a sliver of cautious optimism. A smaller but vocal group believes the new ministers might surprise the nation. They argue that the controversy could actually push the president's daughter and son-in-law to work harder, to prove themselves through action and service. They insist that the ministries might benefit from the pressure. That scrutiny could force accountability. Right now, nothing is settled. The country is holding its breath again, just as it did during the elections. Every decision made by the new ministers will be watched. Every misstep will be amplified. Every success will be debated. Tanzania is in a state of waiting, curious, anxious, hopeful, nervous, all at once. And as the hours pass, one question grows louder across the nation. Where does Tanzania go from here? Inside State House, the atmosphere is tense but controlled. Advisors, ministers, and close aides are working long hours, navigating a delicate balancing act. On one hand, they are aware of the public scrutiny following the appointments of the president's daughter and son-in-law. On the other, they are focused on stabilizing the government and ensuring that essential ministries continue functioning despite the controversy. Sources close to the presidency say that President Samia is acutely aware of the criticism and the mixed reactions that have swept the country. She reportedly spends hours reviewing policy briefs, ministerial reports, and ongoing projects to ensure that her new ministers are prepared for the tasks ahead. Behind closed doors, she emphasizes to her team that loyalty and trust are critical at this moment, but she also insists on results. According to insiders, she is urging both Wanu Hafidh Ameir and Mohamed Mchengerwa to focus on tangible achievements immediately, hoping that performance will gradually quiet public doubts. Yet the pressure is enormous. Every decision, every statement, every policy announcement is being dissected in real time by media, opposition, and the public. Social media continues to be a double-edged sword. It spreads criticism, but also allows supporters to rally in defense of the president and her family. Some aides warn that even small missteps could be magnified into major scandals, while others argue that decisive action and visible results could turn the narrative in their favor. Inside the cabinet, dynamics are shifting. Other ministers, particularly those who are politically experienced but not related to the president, are reportedly treading carefully. They recognize the need to maintain unity, but some quietly question whether family appointments could overshadow their own influence and agendas. The corridors of power are alive with whispers, careful speculation, and a watchful eye on how the public mood will evolve. Meanwhile, political strategists outside State House are trying to read the president's next moves. Some suggest that further reshuffles could follow, aiming to balance criticism with competence. Others warn that if the controversy continues to grow, the government could face serious public pressure, especially if protests or political unrest flare up again. There is also speculation that international partners may begin to monitor developments closely, gauging whether governance is inclusive and merit-based or skewed toward family loyalty. For President Samia herself, these early days of the reshuffle are a test of both leadership and patience. The appointments of her daughter and son-in-law are no longer just political decisions. They are statements about how she intends to lead, how she balances trust with governance, and how she responds to national scrutiny. Advisors say she is determined to let her ministers prove themselves, but at the same time, she understands that perception matters as much as performance. As insiders describe it, the mood inside State House is one of cautious determination. Everyone is aware that mistakes could have ripple effects far beyond the palace walls. Every meeting, every directive, and every public engagement is calculated, aiming to maintain credibility, manage public perception, and above all, keep the government functional. The president is acutely conscious that the nation is watching, that every minister is under scrutiny, and that these first few months will define not only her second term, but also the legacy of her leadership. At the end of the day, Tanzania's story is still being written. The streets, the media, the political parties, and the State House itself are all part of a tense, ongoing narrative. The president's family appointments have opened a new chapter, one filled with uncertainty, hope, skepticism, and the ever-present question, will this bold move bring stability and progress, or will it deepen division and mistrust? For now, the nation waits, watches, and debates, knowing that every decision in the coming weeks could tip the balance of Tanzania's future. As the days pass, the story of President Samia Suluhu Hassan's recent cabinet appointments continues to unfold. The nation remains divided, with discussions buzzing in every corner of Tanzania, from the crowded streets of Dar es Salaam to small towns far from the capital. The appointments of her daughter, Wanu Hafidh Ameir, as Deputy Minister of Education, and her son-in-law, Mohamed Mchengerwa, as Minister of Health, are still fresh, and reactions remain mixed. Some see it as a bold, calculated move by a president seeking trusted allies in critical positions. Others fear it may reinforce a culture of family-centered politics and raise questions about transparency and accountability. In the ministries themselves, the pressure is immense. Every policy decision, every public appearance, and every speech is being watched and analyzed. Citizens, opposition leaders, and media outlets alike are scrutinizing every move, ready to praise or condemn. Across social media, debates rage on, some defending the competence of the newly appointed ministers, others criticizing the symbolism of placing family members in powerful roles. The truth is that no one can yet predict how this chapter will unfold. What is clear is that Tanzania stands at a crossroads. The president's decisions in these early days will shape public trust, national stability, and the direction of governance for years to come. Success could prove critics wrong, demonstrating that loyalty, when paired with competence, can deliver results. Missteps, however, could deepen divisions and undermine confidence in leadership. The nation is watching, waiting, and questioning, fully aware that every choice carries weight. For President Samia, her daughter, and her son-in-law, the path ahead is filled with challenges, opportunities, and scrutiny. For Tanzanians, it is a test of patience, resilience, and hope. And for the world observing, it is a story of power, politics, and the delicate balance between trust and accountability in modern governance. Thank you for watching this detailed look into the unfolding political story in Tanzania. The events we've discussed, from the post-election unrest to the controversial cabinet appointments, are still evolving, and they will shape the country's future in profound ways. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe for updates as this story continues to develop. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about these appointments? Are they a sign of bold leadership or a consolidation of family power? Tanzania's story is still being written, and your voice is part of the conversation.